All right, hello. We are continuing to work on our monochromatic painting project. Remember that monochromatic means one color lightened with water and darkened with black. And last week we had started in the background, so I have two of these started. One is from last week, and I started her in purple. And the other one here, I'm going for a more realistic effect, and I am working in brown. And you can see the background I did differently as well. This I used a plastic baggie back there, kind of just to give it a little bit different texture. This one I had used paper towel. So those are options while you're working on your portrait. A couple of reminders, right? Last week I had recommended that you make a value scale so you could kind of see what colors your color makes, like what values your color creates while you're working. And that you make sure that you keep your photograph handy right next door to your project. So I'm going to continue to work on this one, and so you can see I'm keeping her photograph very, very close. So here are a couple of things to kind of keep in mind. Thing one is, in a painting we always move from the back to the front, and we always go from big to small. And so if I'm thinking in terms of back to front and big to small, I want to like leave small detail things like her eyes and her eyebrows and her nose and her mouth. That'll be the last thing that I paint. And right now my focus is going to be a combination of things. So part one is going to be to put in some of these shadows. And that is a kind of a two-part process. So I'm going to show you how I start. So I can see that it's darker in a couple of spots here. So I'm adding in some of this darker purple that I had ready to go. And you can see when I first add it in, I add it in and it looks a little strange. And then what I'm going to do is I just clean my paintbrush out, and I'm going to squeeze it so that it's mostly dry. And now I can move this paint. So do you see how this paint ends up being able to be moved? It doesn't stay in that weird spot, but I'm able to soften sort of the edges of those shadows using that paint that I put in to that space. Once I am moving too much paint, I can grab a little bit more water and go back. So it's a little like it always feels a little like shading almost with a pencil. I'm like pushing that paint around on my piece of paper now. So going back, pulling that up, looking back and forth at my photograph and making sure that that starts to feel like it's matching what's going on with the portrait itself. It needs to be a little bit darker back here. And again, that's not like the right sort of shape, so I'm going to just soften that up. So you can see that that's how I'm going to just move around and push that paint so that I don't have those strange places, but instead have like the shadow shapes that I need. Okay. And that's definitely the process. And you'll see that I'm, like I said, working big. bigger to smaller, and so this zone over here, or her neck, is definitely larger at this point than the other areas, but this gets really dark, so I just added some black into my purple because her hair gets distinctly darker. But I'm going to need more purple as well. So I could go ahead and work some back here as well to pull in some of this dark section. I'm going to clean my paintbrush out again. Lighten some of this up because her hair gets lighter as it moves to the outside. Making sure too that I'm trying to be careful to like not change the shape of her face here. So I just cleaned my paintbrush off. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to just kind of pull some of this. I can pull highlights out, so I can pull lighter sections in her hair with that clean paintbrush. But her hair, for the most part, is quite a bit darker, so I can go back and get some more of this darker paint. Another trick for hair is to flip your paintbrush over while there's a puddle there, and I can just sort of gently pull some of these strands. You don't want to do too many of these. It just kind of pushes into the edge of your paper a little bit, but it will help give you some of these small details of hair. And it is always a layering process. There is just no doubt about it that it's not about painting one time and having it be finished. It's more about coming back and painting again. After a section has dried. So I'm going to be at the spot here where I need to just let this dry for a bit before I can come back and add more. So I'm going to skip ahead or skip around a little bit while I paint. So I'm looking for, particularly with her hair, I'm looking for areas where it's darker and where it's lighter. And I'm pushing the darker part in first. And I'm going to, like I said, work from big to small and have to skip around. I'm constantly cleaning my paintbrush out and then moving that paint around. And I can go back and I can darken things much easier than I can lighten them. So always the caution. Now, for facial shadows, I'm going to do the same sort of thing, right? I can see that she's got this big shadow on the side of her nose. And so I'm going to grab more purple paint. And I'm going to push some of this purple paint in here. And some in here. And obviously that's too much. It's too dark. So I'm going to do the same thing I did when I was working on her neck area. I just cleaned my paintbrush off. I am going to squeeze it dry. And I can now manipulate this paint and pull it around and make the shadows happen on the side of her face. So you can see how I'm using that like little bit of paint that I put on there to pull across. So this is just done with a clean paintbrush that's wet. clean it off, squeeze it dry. Pull that paint around. Again, I'm constantly looking back and forth at the photograph so that I can see what I'm doing. And when things just start to feel like they're not going really well, I just move on to a different section, let it dry, come back. It's important not to overwork it. It's easier to let it dry and come back to it and work on it again rather than fuss with it while the paper is wet. So if you're feeling like you have a struggle, just like I said, let it rest. You can come back later. Coming back later is easier and better for the painting and the paper than it is to try to push it. So I'm kind of getting to that point now. Like I can see that her whole cheek on this side is darker. So I'm just going to go ahead and try to move a bunch of this purple around. And she will look weird for a while, and that's really normal. So don't panic when things look really scary. Just go ahead and keep working on the paint. Keep putting in your darker sections. Keep blending them along. Make sure you're working from, like I said, big to small. So I'm not going to worry about her eyes or anything like that right now. I am just working on her facial shadows and moving those in. Like I can see her chin is darker than her neck, so I want her chin to be darker than her neck. Right until it isn't. And then just, keep working. Keep working. We will finish these by the end of the week. So if you're a senior, this will be the last painting that we do together. So you will want to have it done by Thursday. Like I said, remember that you just want to make sure that you're working for a while and then letting it rest for a while. And that you're working next to your photo so you can kind of make sure that things are looking like they're matching up as much as possible. And know that it will look a little weird to start with, and that is kind of normal, okay? Have fun. If you are having trouble and want some feedback, let me know and post a picture of your painting to the classroom, and I can give you some comments or help. Otherwise, just keep painting.